Today we'll be talking about the recent Superman film, and there will be spoilers in this thing, so be warned in case you haven't seen it yet. I'll be honest, Superman's never really been my thing. I think like a lot of kids in my era, superhero films were very much in my field of interest. I had the old Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, which was a formative experience for me, followed by the Dark Knight trilogy. Around that time they released a Superman film, and I just didn't care much for it, to tell you the truth. Dude seemed pretty vanilla and pretty boring. A style of hero for a bygone age that doesn't really work anymore. Just a dull sort of character, really. I think that's what coloured my perception of the character, and then the MCU took off, and to tell you the truth, I just didn't care much for the DCEU the first time around. That being said though, when they announced that James Gunn was taking over and rebooting the DCEU into the DCU, I was pretty excited. Some of my favourite Marvel films have been made by James Gunn. I love me some Guardians of the Galaxy. Then we started getting those first looks, and suddenly I could feel it. That hype started to grow and bubble away just beneath the surface, until we got some proper trailers, and suddenly I was all aboard the hype train. I 100% have had superhero fatigue the last couple of years, almost entirely due to Marvel and their oversaturation of the MCU with films and Disney Plus original shows. Just this year, the fog has somewhat lifted, although for the most part, it's just for the movies. I'm still not all that keen to be watching any of the shows right now. So I was actually coming into this film with a far more open mind than I would have expected than I would have a couple of years ago. I don't really know much about the cast, but I do know Nicholas Hoult, and he's awesome, and I was pretty excited for his take on Lex Luthor as well. Of course, before I went to the cinema, I did take a peek at reviews and opinions to gauge whether I was walking into a disaster or not. You kind of have to in this day and age, because there's nothing worse than going into a film thinking it's going to be great, your hype's at fever pitch, only to be let down and you leave the cinema feeling robbed. For me, it's always better to know if the film sucks ahead of time, so I can go in with minimal expectations and go from there. However, that was not the case with this movie, as it had really good reviews. Much better than I was expecting, to tell you the truth. At least from the critical side of things, as it's clear that the film reviewers are firmly over the concept of superhero movies for the most part, and they're going to judge them far more harshly than they would have in the past. Despite that, it's currently sitting on an 83% critical score on Rotten Tomatoes, off of 259 reviews, and also has an incredible audience score of 96% approval off of over 2,500 reviews. Now we'll see how that audience score levels out, because as of writing this, the film hasn't actually had its proper release, and it was just those pre-release screenings that were determining the audience response, but I do have to say that from what I've seen online, it is doing very well with audiences. Pretty much everybody's positive about it, even if they aren't raving about the quality. Although I have seen the subsection of Snyderverse fans that absolutely hate it, but I suspect they're rather angry about the reboot of the universe in general at this stage. Obviously, I don't have any information to share about how much money it's making or whether it's doing well on its opening weekend, because as of writing this, none of that data's out there. However, we do know the budget and have some idea of projections. The film had a budget of $225 million, which is a massive, massive budget. In order to break even, it's going to need to gross somewhere above $500 million, which is certainly doable. Man of Steel grossed $670 million, although the status quo of superhero films was certainly different back then. In order for the film to be actually considered successful though, apparently it needs to gross around $700 million, which is fair enough. It's their first movie in a new era, and it's one of the big franchise characters they want to build this universe around. So obviously, you don't want it to be a film that didn't lose money. You want to put your best foot forward and actually kickstart your franchise with a big hitter and profit. Based on the projections that are coming in as well, it does seem likely it's going to do well. DC themselves have estimated they're going to get between $90 and $125 million domestically. For reference, Man of Steel made $116 million, so this would put it on par with that. Deadline is slightly more optimistic, with an estimate of between $115 and $130 million. Like I said, that's just domestic, and it isn't taking into account international numbers. Based on all of that, it seems likely the film's going to be a big success, and I'm very glad about that, because I think the film was great, really great, and is 100% the perfect way to start their new cinematic universe. There really is a lot to love, and so I guess now's as good a time as any to jump into it, and we'll start off by talking about the story. The film tosses you right into the thick of it. It doesn't waste time getting bogged down in what's going on, and establishes right from the get-go the world of gods and monsters, where metahumans are commonplace, is something that has existed on Earth for about 300 years. We don't see Superman land on Earth as a baby and spend time looking at his parents raising him in some prologue sequence. You don't see the origins of Superman and his early stages of being a hero. He's already been Superman for 3 years. He's famous as a hero and beloved in Metropolis and across the world. Hell, when we first meet him, he's actually just had his ass kicked by the Hammer of Baravia, who is actually the mysterious metahuman Ultraman who works as an asset for billionaire Lex Luthor, who in turn has an obsessive hatred for Superman. It's like the original Star Wars. They give you the opening crawl to set the scene of the world you're going to be watching, and then they chuck you right into the thick of the story. And I love that they do that here. It doesn't bog you down in origins and exposition. You learn what you need to as you go. And it makes the film all the more enjoyable as a result. Same deal with the likes of the newer Spider-Man adaptation, where they don't bother going into the whole spider bite and Uncle Ben dying. We all know that story. There's no need to bog things down and go over that when you can jump right in. So Superman gets his ass beat by the Hammer of Baravia, who claims to have been attacking him and damaging Metropolis as a form of vengeance for Superman intervening in the invasion of Baravia's neighbouring country, Jaranpur, by bloodlessly defeating the army and threatening to hurt the president of Baravia should he ever come back. He also pushed him up against a cactus, which sounds very brutal. Here is where we meet Krypto the Superdog, which is a concept that sounds very, very stupid, and like something out of the goofy comics of the 60s with his little red cape. However, against the odds, they make it work perfectly. I think that's something the film does very well. It moves away from the idea of superheroes needing to be overly grounded and overly gritty. They don't all need to have that edge. This movie showcases a Superman who's completely idealistic, and by being so, he inspires more cynical characters to be the same, which I think forms a big part of the actual character's core. Krypto takes Superman to the Fortress of Solitude in Antarctica, where Superman's robotic helpers strap him down and use concentrated solar energy to heal him up whilst he listens to a recording of his biological parents. The full recording was damaged from his crash landing on Earth as a baby, but the parts that survive talk about how they're sending him to Earth to protect him and that he should serve humanity. This is what inspired him to become Superman in the first place, and it brings him a lot of comfort. I found it really fun that right from the beginning, they hint that something is off here. I know the idea of evil Jor-El rubs some fans the wrong way, but I actually really like it. Like I said, they rather cleverly integrate little hints in this early sequence that not everything's as it seems. For starters, the fact that the recording was damaged and he could only listen to the first part was completely sus right from the get-go. But there's also the idea that Robot Number 4 says that recording brings him comfort, and yet he's laying there screaming. When you watch that through the first time, it's all well and good, just seems like it's a bit of a joke. However, at the end of the movie, they repeat this scene, and now it's with his true parents being projected, the Kents. He's still badly injured, and yet he's laying there at peace and smiling while getting blasted by the radiation. I just like that little point of comparison. I found it clever. Superman then goes back to confront the Hammer, who once again gets beaten down publicly, with it being revealed to the audience that the Hammer is Ultraman, who's being controlled by Lex Luthor, who in turn is telling his staff what combat maneuvers to use in real time. Of all the things the movie did, I found this to be one of the coolest. It felt very fresh and unique, and gave a way for Lex to actually compete with Superman. On top of that, it does give this suggestion that with all this knowledge that he has, if he was somehow able to find a way to compete with Superman physically himself, then he would be an even greater threat than simply controlling Ultraman. It makes him seem like an actual evil genius as opposed to us being told that he is and having to believe him. That's our introduction to his character, humbling Superman twice over simply using his brain and his resources. It's a great opening section as well because it immediately presents Superman, who often comes across as impossibly strong, as actually beatable in the right circumstances. It allows you to buy into the subsequent enemies that he faces down because you don't know whether they could be stronger than him or not. I just found this to be a smart way to start because it develops those stakes right out of the gate. Here we also get some of the Clark Kent side of Superman. We see that he rather hilariously follows the Peter Parker school of thought. Where Peter Parker would get insane shots of Spider-Man as a photographer and use that to make money, Clark Kent creates fake interviews with Superman. Of course, this somewhat draws the ire of his girlfriend of 3 months, Lois Lane, and so when they're having dinner together, he decides to put his money where his mouth is and allows her to do a sit-down interview. Before we go any further, I do need to put across my hot take of the day. In this movie, with the portrayal of Superman and Lois, I didn't get that much chemistry, to tell you the truth. I know they were trying to portray it as an early days relationship, with her especially being rather unsure about dating him, but I just didn't feel it. I'm sure that a lot of other people did, but it just wasn't for me, which was odd because I thought that both of them were really great in their roles when they were working with other characters. Superman had chemistry with literally everybody, and Lois's scenes with the Justice Gang, her mission with Mr. Terrific, and then working with the crew at the Daily Planet, they were all great scenes that were perfect showcases of the characters and their personalities, just didn't translate in the romantic sense. The interview segment of this scene though was done really well. I enjoyed it a lot because it showcases just how Superman's mind works. About how he thinks that since he has these powers, he needs to be out there doing good, saving lives and stopping violence wherever he possibly can. That's why he intervened in the conflict. He viewed it as a meaningless war that would only kill the innocent, and so he stepped in. Doing good and the morally right thing trumps what is specifically legal. Meanwhile, Lois has the more lawful viewpoint and questions what gives him the right to intervene, especially when it could flare up tensions and make things worse politically, fostering more and more international tensions between governments, which could lead to further violence and instability. I like this part of the scene a lot because it would be so easy for the film to take the cynical route and say, oh, Superman has no right to do all that, check your privilege, yada yada yada, checks and balances, work within the system. But instead, no, the film acknowledges the system's broken, and so he has to work above it in order to protect people from the likes of Lex Luthor, who have control over everything with his money and manipulations. I also like that the film has Superman and Lois actually try things from the other's perspective. Superman decides to do the lawful thing and hand himself in for questioning, only to be refused any rights for being an alien and chucked into a pocket dimension prison and tortured with kryptonite. whilst Lois works with Mr. Terrific and goes against the law to save him, with the remainder of the Justice Gang also being inspired to get involved in politics for the sake of doing good later in the movie. It further plays into that theme of Superman inspiring people to believe that morality supersedes legality, which I really liked. In a meeting with government officials, Luthor offers to set up a task force known as Planet Watch, who are able to deal with otherworldly threats and intend to bring in Superman for questioning, but due to the power that Superman wields, the government's unwilling to move against him without any proof. Thus, Luthor devises a strategy. He releases a little creature into Metropolis that's going to grow larger and larger with each passing moment until it's a Godzilla-sized threat. Superman, of course, goes to fight it, and here we get some of the supporting cast of heroes. Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, who are a corporate-sponsored trio that form the Justice Gang, and they arrive on the scene to help fight, and they're a lot more aggressive and violent than Superman. This is yet another scene that really helps to set Superman apart from the rest without just telling us. Despite being the strongest being on the planet, Superman aims to find the best way possible to win. In his eyes, that means no casualties for either side of the battle, and as minimal damage as possible. He goes out of his way to keep this thing alive, and also to save things like dogs and squirrels. For him, no life is too small. Everything's precious. Meanwhile, the Justice Gang is just very brutal. They go for the eyes, they hurt this thing, and then they straight up kill it. Hell, I think they were just going to let it drop after it died until Superman grabbed it and placed it down, avoiding any collateral damage. Plus, at the end, Superman was really bummed out at the fact the Justice Gang killed it, as opposed to taking it to a space zoo or something like that. It really helps to showcase his personality in a fun way. They don't have to sit you down and have him give a speech or a monologue about how he doesn't want to kill if it can be avoided. Instead, they showcase that message throughout the action sequences where he prioritizes saving people and animals, and even goes easy on this creature whilst being sad at its death. As this is all going on, Lex and his squad have infiltrated the Fortress of Solitude and destroyed his robots whilst also subduing and kidnapping Krypto. During the course of this, the engineer, one of Luthor's goons, is able to repair the audio and Lex translates it to complete the message, which is apparently unaltered. It's not even a lie. The reveal is that whilst the early segment of the recording is about serving Earth and finding a new home where he can be safe and powerful, it quickly pivots into them wanting him to essentially turn this planet into a second Krypton to be ruled over by him and his descendants, killing anybody that he needs to do to make that happen, and essentially spread his genes all over to create a new race of Kryptonians that can live as gods on this new world. Luthor leaks this online, and obviously, it shakes the world's confidence in the Man of Steel, and after he briefly crashes out when he learns they murdered his robots and stole his dog, he decides to hand himself in, where he's chucked into a pocket dimension prison and subjected to kryptonite torture created by Metamorpho, who in turn is being held hostage with the threat of them hurting his son to keep him compliant. I have to say, I love how angry he got with Krypto being taken, and that in the end a big part of him handing himself in was because he didn't want Krypto to be all alone and scared. Once more, it's a showcase of the pure heart this dude has, even in the face of all the bullshit that's being flung his way. After all, we see a lot of talk show segments that discuss how he's clearly a master manipulator and an alien invader. With Superman gone, Lex and the Barabian government feel confident to start to move ahead with their joint plan of conquering Jaranpur, with the plan to split it between them. Baravia taking the western portion, and Lex the east, where he plans to build a technocratic utopia in his own image. At the Daily Planet, both Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen jump into action to try to clear Superman's name. Lois through joining up with Mr. Terrific to try to figure out where Clark's being held and them working to free him, whilst Jimmy contacts his ex-girlfriend, now Lex Luthor's actual girlfriend, who is still obsessed with him somehow, in order to gain details about what Lex is up to. Before she in turn gets imprisoned by Lex in the Pocket Realm, she manages to send a huge photo dump to Jimmy, and initially, he just thinks they're sexy selfies. But in reality, in the background of many of them you can see a lot of incriminating evidence that reveals Lex's true goals and involvement in the downfall of Superman and the current Barabian invasion. I found this whole subplot with Jimmy extremely funny. Probably one of my highlights of the film, to tell you the truth. Lois and Terrific manage to open the portal to the Pocket Realm, which allows Metamorpho, his son, Superman, and Krypto to escape, as after Lex executed a Superman fan in front of Supes and Metamorpho, he realized that he can't in good conscience allow this to continue. Hence a prison break takes place where Metamorpho is able to replicate the power of the sun and heal Clark's immediate injuries from the kryptonite exposure, although he still has poisoning he needs to sleep off, so Lois takes him and Krypto back to the Kent farm in Kansas to allow him to recover, whilst also giving him a chance to speak to his parents and realize that what makes him Superman wasn't the message from his biological parents. It's the choices he's made. He chooses to be good when he actually has the power to subjugate the world, and that's what makes him Superman. I actually found this part very moving, even though in the end it was a pretty stock standard speech that you often hear characters give to a hero when they're having doubts or think their past defines them. Here, Luthor's plan properly kicks into gear, with a simultaneous opening of a black hole from the pocket dimension that threatens to consume Metropolis completely, whilst the Barabian army invades Jaranpur. Green Lantern and Metamorpho arrive, having been inspired by the heroism of Superman, and they pretty much destroy the Barabian army with ease, whilst Hawkgirl attacks the Barabian capital and straight up executes the president. Yikes. Kind of showcasing the world's fears about metahumans with that one, huh? I will be honest, whilst that part was very funny, at the same time I don't think it was given quite the gravity it deserved. A member of the Justice Gang, who I'm pretty sure are a corporate-sponsored group, so corporate agents, just intervened in a war and killed a world leader. I just feel like they rather quickly brushed over all of that, although I suppose they might follow up on it in a subsequent movie. Having had a look at their current slate though, who even really knows? I have to say, the section where the citizens are all lined up at the border with a Superman flag and are chanting his name, that was beautiful. I loved it, especially when the little boy is the last one left to run away, holding that hope that Superman's going to return to save them, and in the end it's Superman's legacy of inspiring other heroes that saves the day. Who's cutting the onions? Meanwhile, Superman and Mr. Terrific are drawn into a fight against the Engineer and Ultraman, and I know the film's called Superman. I know that Mr. Terrific got a really cool fight where he takes down the goons at Luthor Corp and protects Lois, and he gets the fight against Godzilla as well where he kills it, but it would have been nice to see him actually get involved in at least a bit of this fight. It felt like he got instantly knocked out, and it was sad to see after a fun build for his character throughout the movie. Yes, in the end he plays the sidekick role in this movie, but I would have liked to see him last a little bit longer in this fight, then get taken out, and then you can go to the Engineer and Ultraman overpowering Superman, with Supes then flying up high to slam them and take him out. Regardless though, this fight was really cool. Once again, it's another great example of actually showcasing the strength of the villains in a way that makes a lot of sense, with a believable way of actually killing Superman. Obviously you know they're not going to be able to kill him, but it helps you buy in and suspend your disbelief, in at least thinking they could do some serious damage. He takes out the Engineer with his big slam, and then it's just him and Ultraman remaining, with the reveal that Ultraman is his clone with very limited intelligence, who is controlled directly by Lex Luthor, who in turn knows every way to fight Superman based on 3 years of data. And it's a great fight here. Just really great action. And then they bring in Krypto as well as the secret weapon to destroy the drones they use to monitor and control Ultraman, which in turn had been foreshadowed earlier in the film with Krypto destroying some of Mr. Terrific's drones because he thought they were balls. Superman and Ultraman have to go head to head, with this fight in particular being one of my favourites in the movie, and it ends with Superman being forced to toss him into a black hole to win. He goes and confronts Luthor, Krypto savages the man, whilst Terrific shuts down the black hole. At the same time, Superman is vindicated when the Daily Planet drops an article that blows the whole story wide open, and reveals that Lex was behind everything from the very beginning. Lex Luthor cries, Lois and Superman kiss. Supergirl turns up from her interplanetary bender to pick up Krypto, her pet dog, and Clark rests whilst watching videos of his childhood with the Kents. Oh, and he rebuilt his robots, which was nice to see. I like that they included Supergirl in the actual film instead of in the post-credits scene. If you're setting up a linked film, I think in the actual movie is the place to do it for the most part. I like that they used the post-credits scene just as fun little tidbits and scenes. Okay, so that was the story, and it was great. Like I said, there were some parts I questioned, but a truly amazing first outing for the DCU in that regard. I hope the writing can be that strong across the board. Oh, and another thing about the writing that I liked was that whilst the film was funny, it wasn't too funny either. Yeah, there were jokes and goofy elements, but I think some people were writing it off as likely to be a very Guardians of the Galaxy-esque thing, which is one of Marvel's goofiest properties of all. One that's filled with quips and absurdity, but that works for that franchise. And I don't think it would work for Superman, and so I'm glad that James Gunn dialed it back. Yes, they still had some of that, but for the most part, all of the humour works for the film, and it never undercut any of the film's pathos either. They let serious moments remain serious, like when his fanboy guy that helped him get to his feet after the Hammer defeated him for a second time gets shot in the head. They even had Superman straight up sobbing after that one. Another's when he discovered the truth about his parents. They let that one marinate and soak in, and it paid dividends. The film was an ensemble piece in a lot of ways. Yes, they had Superman as the lead, and they didn't become distracted from that goal of establishing his character and setting up the franchise, but they also found a lot of time to flesh out the other characters too. Mr. Terrific, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, hell, even the Kents. We got to see what they're all about and why Clark is the way he is. Even though he didn't have all that much screen time, we saw Guy Gardner as the Green Lantern get somewhat fleshed out and established. Jimmy Olsen too. I think the only real big miss here was with Hawkgirl, who I don't think got much time to shine at all. Of the trio, she seemed to pull the least focus, and if they're bringing her back in the future, they need to work to rectify that. For now though, she was just there. I got more from Jimmy's ex-girlfriend Eve than I did from her, to tell you the truth, and it's not the fault of the actress. It's just that they never gave her a chance to shine compared to the others, except when she kills the president, but even then, like I said, they don't dive into that all that much as to what the consequences might be. Regardless though, I do hope that they continue to showcase some of these characters in future films because they were a lot of fun. I particularly like Mr. Terrific, and I think that he's the perfect character for you to slot into films of various other characters. He probably couldn't anchor his own movie, but a great secondary hero to round out a solo film for a different character. All around, the acting was top tier as well. Whilst, like I said earlier, there were some chemistry issues at times, I think all the actors really embodied their characters so well and brought them to life. You instantly knew what they were about from watching them for a scene or two. Even Hawkgirl, even if the actual script wasn't giving her all that much. Visually, the film's incredible. Cost $225 million to make, and you can tell. You can really tell. Sometimes these types of things can feel janky and rushed and cheap, but not here. Visually, I thought everything was incredible. The city, the costumes, the creatures, and the effects. I loved how bright everything was. It's not gritty, not grungy, but bright and brilliant. I think the whole look of the film just fits the characters so well. The action set pieces were great too and felt so varied. There are hard-hitting slugfests like Superman vs. Ultraman, all 3 times. Or was it 4 times? There's the big battle against Godzilla, chipping away at it little by little. The Mr. Terrific fight where it follows the Lois point of view as she watches a real hero at work, kicking absolute ass. The curb stomp by Guy and Metamorpho against Boravia, which is played for laughs for the most part. The really wild and somewhat suspense-filled fight in the Pocket Realm with the Proton River and the Black Hole, with Superman trying to protect that baby at all costs. The final huge battle there at the end, and the music montage where Lex and his goon squad kill the robots at the Fortress of Solitude. All excellent and all different, which kept it feeling very fresh. The music was great too, at least the one track I can actually remember. I really loved the main theme. That's probably the one that stuck in my head the most afterwards. I wish I could sit here and be one of those guys that's able to remember all of the tracks, but I just can't. Oh well. I really wasn't expecting to like Superman this much, but it really was incredible. I'm very excited for the future of the DCU now. I'm keen to see their take on Supergirl, and if it grips me the same way as this did. Previously, I was not at all that interested, but now I'm invested. Let's go! And so with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the film if you've seen it? Do you like it? Hate it? Do you think the DCU is going to be an overall success? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.